Hi all and welcome to another week of the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams and we're going to get right into the links for the show. And you can listen live on Spreaker.com/user/8955881. And you can also listen live on the website thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. We have all the archives there as well. The must listen to shows, the Shane shows, the Manor World Holding Trust shows, they're all there. And a load of self-empowerment documents and also shielding, which is important. We have the Facebook page, Truth, Honour and Integrity, and the Facebook social media alternative, also Truth, Honour and Integrity. And some people can't find it, send an email for the show, which also you can add comments, not proposals for the People's Club, please. Comments and questions for the show to truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. The proposals that some of you have been sent, and there's a question in one of them. One of the questions, about 3 pages of them. I'm a bit behind on them. Proposals are to be sent to thepeoplesclub.org. Now, obviously, we don't have funding yet, and all those proposals will be looked at once the funding takes place. So that's why there's no updates. And for those of you who wish to support me on my Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/TommyW/memberships. All the transcripts of the shows from the past 18-19 months, apart from 2 months, which I will get round to eventually, are all up there as well, so you can catch up with that. Right, let's get into some news and some Q&A, and then the intel and the op-ed pieces. Quite a bit to cover again tonight. President Trump and congressional leaders are racing against the deadline again. And to avert next week's partial government shutdown, and pushing disputes over the president's border wall and an array of legislation that touches on everything from Saudi Arabia to farming policy into the waning hours of the Republican domination of Congress. But the deepest impasse, and the one with the greatest potential to prompt a year-end breakdown, is Trump's demand for $5 billion for the wall on the United States southern border. The President has pressed for its inclusion in the final spending package before his party loses its House majority in January, and this is why there's a bit of an impasse. And obviously the Democratic leaders have refused to accept it, and so we have a standoff. I'll have more about that later. The US judge ordered the Justice and State Departments last week to reopen an inquiry into whether Hillary Clinton used a private email server. I don't know why they need an inquiry into that. I think half of America knows by now. While the Secretary of State, while she was Secretary of State, to deliberately evade public record laws, and to answer whether the agencies acted in bad faith by not telling a court for months that they had asked in mid-2014 for the missing emails to be returned. Now, this order risks reopening bipartisan wounds, which is highly prevalent at the moment, and this has gone on for the last 2 years, and I expect the way it's at the rate they're going, it'll go on for another 2 years. It's about time it was wrapped up and dealt with. But in issuing the order last Thursday, the US District Judge, Mr. Lambert, said the Spirit of Freedom of Information Act required it, and in a narrow but sharply worded 10-page opinion, Mr. Lambert wrote that despite the government's claimed presumption of transparency, faced with one of the gravest modern offences to government openness, the Obama administration's State and Justice Departments fell far short of the law's requirements in a lawsuit for documents. And he also added that despite President Trump's repeated campaign attacks against Clinton for not making her emails public, the current Justice Department made things worse by taking the position that agencies are not obliged to research or search for records not in the government's possession when a freedom of information request is made. Really? Agencies are not obliged to search for records not in the government's possession. Now you know why things take far too long. The transcript has been made available, or a partial transcript, of the final words uttered by Jamal Khashoggi after he was set upon by a Saudi hit squad at the country's consulate in Istanbul. Now, according to a source briefed on the investigation into the killing of the Washington Post columnist, the source had read a translated script of an audio recording of Khashoggi's painful last moments and said it was clear that the killing on October the 2nd was no botched rendition attempt, but the execution of a premeditated plan to murder the journalist. Now, during the course of the gruesome scene, the source described Mr. Khashoggi struggling against a group of people who were determined to kill him, where he says he can't breathe 3 times during the transcript, and the transcript notes also the sounds of Khashoggi's body being dismembered by a saw, as the alleged perpetrators are advised to listen to music to block out the sound. And according to the source, the transcript suggests that a series of phone calls were made, briefing them on the progress, and the Turkish officials believe the calls were made to senior figures in Riyadh, yes, the Crown Prince, in my opinion. Now, following on from that, the US Senate today has voted to withdraw US military aid for Saudi Arabia's war on Yemen. 2 of the countries I told you to listen out for, Israel being the other one, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and to blame the kingdom's crown prince for the murder of the journalist. Members of the Donald Trump party joined Democrats today by voting 56-41 to rebuke the long-time US ally over the reporter Jamal Khashoggi's death. Now, Mr. Trump has vowed to veto the largely symbolic measure and is unlikely to pass the House of Representatives, but experts say Yemen is experiencing the world's worst humanitarian crisis, and the non-binding War Powers resolution also calls on Saudi Arabia to moderate its increasingly erratic foreign policy. Yes, well, now Daddy's finally been laid to rest. That should get a bit easier. The US chose to cease refueling Saudi warplanes last month, and today's resolution, if it were passed into law, would prohibit that practice from resuming. This has the potential to become the next item that's going to be played out across the Portal People screens. There will be ramifications. And former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie said that President Donald Trump's team should be concerned about the indictment at the time against Michael Cohen, because the language used in it suggests that federal prosecutors have further corroborating evidence. Now, prosecutors in New York last Friday indicated that Trump breached campaign finance laws by instructing Cohen his former attorney to illegally pay off 2 women who had claimed they had affairs with him, which was threatening the 2016 campaign. On Sunday, Christie told ABC this week that the language prosecutors used in the sentencing memo sounded very definitive, which would mean they likely have more than just one witness. Now, Cohen later in the week was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in jail. I don't think we've heard the last of that. Having increased the levy on gas or petrol, whichever way you choose to call it, which was imposed on France and many other countries that the IMF threatened, I think it's time for all countries to tell the IMF and the defunct UN to piss off, quite frankly. They are both a failed and bankrupt programme. We don't need either for each country to progress. But President Emmanuel Macron, following the demonstrations and protests, admitted he'd lacked sensitivity for the concerns of regular people and promised a raft of new spending as he sought to draw a line under the month-long yellow vest crisis, which has gone through France and is now thankfully going into other countries, Sweden amongst them. And in a statement aired on Monday night on French television, he urged companies to pay their workers a year-end bonus that won't be taxed, ended levies on overtime, and indicated the government would fund a €100 a month, which is $114, increase in the minimum wage, and also abolished a controversial tax on pensions below €2,000 a month. He went on to say, I feel in many ways that the anger of the yellow vests is justified, and France is facing a state of social and economic emergency, he added. So the yellow vests got the way. That's what we've been saying on THI for a long time. It's the people that have the power, not them. You know, it's not Macron. This is where THI excels and getting people to understand. All the ills of the world have got nothing to do with governments. It's not to do with Trump, it's not to do with May, it's not to do with Macron or Merkel or any other Prime Minister or President. They're so far down the chain, it's not even funny. You know, these are all imposed political ideologies and reasonings that they are there to pass on. Now, I'm not suggesting that politicians are any way good, because some of them clearly are not. In fact, most of them aren't. But blaming the government is not the way forward. Blaming the system. Once people start blaming the system, then people are really getting what's going on. You know, Macron is the puppet that has been forced to back down. Like I said, people power. But Macron was forced into that programme of putting levies on petrol or gas by the IMF. This is what's going on. Facing the prospect of a humiliating defeat, Prime Minister Theresa May said on Monday she would seek to postpone a parliamentary vote on her proposal for Britain's departure from the European Union. And this threw the process into disarray and highlighted her tenuous hold on power. Now, Parliament in Britain had been scheduled to vote on Tuesday on the agreement that Mrs May reached with the bloc for Britain's withdrawal, more commonly known as Brexit. And but after weeks of bitter criticism and days of parliamentary debate had left no doubt that the plan would be soundly rejected by lawmakers, due in large part to objections over plans to dealing with the Irish border that pro-Brexit lawmakers say that could potentially leave the United Kingdom tied to some of the bloc's rules indefinitely. Now, Mrs May survived the vote of no confidence since that peace, but the Brexit, as I said, when the vote was announced, and we were live on air at the time in Cosmic Voice, it'll just roll on. It's all becoming a distraction game. Beijing has adopted a harsh new tone against Canada this week, summoning the country's ambassador to China and threatening serious consequences if Ottawa does not release immediately Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei chief financial officer. The warning issued by the Chinese Foreign Ministry late last Saturday marks a shift in response from China, and initially China faulted both Canada and the United States for the arrest of Ms Meng, who is the daughter of the founder of the company and a former army engineer who built his company into China's largest private enterprise. And it now appears China is setting its sights on Canada only. No surprise. And Miss Meng's arrest caused shockwaves in a country that sees that company as a flag bearer for Chinese economic aspirations, and the Foreign Ministry warning was followed by coordinated commentaries from the People's Daily and Xinhua News, and two of the central organs of China's state press. Canada will pay a heavy price if it does not recognise and accept Chinese demands, saying no one should underestimate China's confidence, will and strength. Now, the Canadian officials arrested Ms Meng at the request of the United States, which has sought to extradite her over accusations she committed fraud in misleading an investigation into the sale of US technology to Iran. You always get Iran in something. China summons the US Ambassador Terry Branstad to meet with the Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Li Yucheng and accused Washington of being unreasonable. On it goes. Report highlighting the poverty which is indicative to all Western nations currently as part of the Soros, UN, Rothschilds, Chinese elders plan to move all the funds and money to the east and essentially bankrupt Europe and America, plus Canada. And more than 500,000 British workers have been swept into working poverty over the past 5 years. And this is according to a report that shows the number of people with a job but living below the breadline has risen faster than employment, a common theme. And the latest sign of the link between entering work and making ends meet has become increasingly frayed in Britain, and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation said the number of workers in poverty hit 4 million last year. That's people working. Meaning about 1 in 8 in the economy are now classed as working poor. Nearly all of the increase comes as growing numbers of working parents find it harder to earn enough money to pay for food, clothing and accommodation due to weak wage growth. Also an erosion of welfare support and tax credits and the rising cost of living. 500,000 more children have become trapped in poverty over the last 5 years as a direct consequence, reaching 4.1 million at the end of last year. It means that in a typical classroom of 30 children, 9 would come from a household in poverty, 1 in 3. And The chief executive of the foundation said, "We are seeing a rising tide of child poverty as more parents are unable to make ends meet, and this despite working. This is unacceptable, and the charity defines the poverty line as being when households earn less than 60% of the median income, which is adjusted for size and type of household." Now, the average median income for UK households after housing costs was £425 a week, which is roughly $600, and it called on the government to end its 4-year freeze on benefits, which began in 2016, which was a year earlier than planned, so they can collect more money, saying it would help lift 200,000 people out of poverty and give 14 million people on low incomes an extra £270, which is about $330 on average in the year 2020-21. Another sign of the times, with the programs that they implemented, suddenly makes other groups become minorities, But universities in Britain this week are now setting targets to recruit more white male students. This is in Britain. After low numbers meant that white males are now classed as a minority group in Britain. Essex and Aston universities have become Britain's first non-elite institutions to write the target into their official recruitment plans, putting white males on a par with black students and women engineers. White British students are in a minority at roughly 1 in 10 institutions, and meanwhile on certain courses such as pharmacy, business and some science degrees, more than 7 in 10 students is from an ethnic minority. In 2016-17, 27% of the UK undergraduate intake were white males, down from 30% 10 years ago. A federal judge on Tuesday ordered adult film star Stormy Daniels, slapper, to pay President Trump more than $293,000 in legal fees amid their ongoing legal battles. The US District Judge James Otero ordered Daniels, whose real name is Stephanie Clifford, to pay the fees in her defamation case against Trump, which Otero dismissed in October. The slapper got slapped. Oh dear. Another sign of the times. This is a common thing, but I wanted to pull it out because of the sheer volume of money involved. A Harris County, Texas grand jury this week indicted a former Houston's First Baptist Church minister for allegedly stealing more than $800,000 from the church. Really? Now, the Jarrell G. Altick, who is 40, allegedly embezzled the money during a 6-year period, which is roughly $120,000 a year. That ended in November of 2017, according to the Harris County District Attorney's Office. Now, prosecutors say Altick allegedly spent the stolen funds on overseas trips with his family, groceries, and to pay for his doctorate in divinity. Really? From Lancaster Bible College. And they added that he stole the money in numbers of ways, including forged payments, authorizations, and Mr. Altick surrendered to authorities on Tuesday. How is it that the church can miss $125,000 a year? How much money does that church really have? is it the church's role to collect money when their communities are suffering, particularly in Houston? Why isn't the church just giving money out to the people? Isn't that what it's supposed to be about? And yet this particular church can just miss $125,000 a year from its funds and not notice. Strasbourg, there was a shooting this week, and like all Middle Eastern terrorists, they all have the habit of two things. They all say Allahu Akbar, and they also own up to what they've done. Strange people, nobody else does, do they? But this gunman yelled Allahu Akbar, God is greatest, in Arabic, and he opened fire on people at a Christmas market. France's anti-terror prosecutors told reporters, and Remy Height said 2 people were killed, which is now 3, and 1 left brain dead, which I'm assuming that was the 3rd person in the eastern French city. 12 were wounded, 6 seriously. Now, the main suspect, named by local media as Sharif Shekat, is known to authorities as someone who was radicalised in prison. Really? And the 29-year-old was armed with a gun and a knife and escaped the area in a taxi. The attacker boasted to the taxi driver, who has spoken to the police, that he killed 10 people and said he'd been injured in a firefight with soldiers. You know, I don't know how people listen to this drivel. I really don't. You know, why is it only Middle Eastern terrorists that admit to what they've done? You know, there's a bomb goes off and the Taliban or the Al-Qaeda or ISIS, they all go, it was me, it was me. Who else does that? You know, the fact that this guy, Sharif Shekat, works for Mossad, oops, and the incident was in France, oops again, should tell you all you need to know. Final news piece, so we go into some rapid fire Q&A. Californians, fresh from voting from Feinstein and Pelosi, La La Land, may not like this particular news that came out this week, and perhaps they'll all be typing on it, OMG, oh my god. But texting in California may soon come with an extra fee on their mobile phone bills. State regulators are weighing a tax on text messaging to help fund a program that makes phone service available to low-income residents. A texting surcharge could help sustain the public purpose program budget, which has risen to $998 million in 2017 from $670 million in 2011. And this is according to a report from the California Public Utilities Commission, no doubt linked to the Rothschilds Group recently. And revenue from the telecom industry that funds the program has declined to $11.3 billion last year from $16.5 billion in 2011. Personally, I would put a tax on politicians in La La Land on breathing and double it for speaking. Then that will pay that stupid bill. It's almost as idiotic as the jizz woman in Texas. You know, these are the people that are deciding, or supposed to be deciding, our future. What about all the kiddie fiddlers and fake talent people down Hollywood Boulevard? How about taking some money off them, as they clearly have far too much to waste on bum implants and lip implants and everything else that's fake. You know, I think the California people have suffered enough stupidity over the last 4 years of trying to empty them out of their own state. I think it's time we emptied out all of the politicians. Lots of clowns. Let's get into some questions. In your previous show, you told us that when a person gets killed, both the victim and the murderer go down a level in astral layers. How unfair is it is for the victim? Yes, it is. But it was part of that harvesting program. Now, I don't know whether that the incidents recently to do with the binding and the emptying of the realms may change that. It should do. But as it stands now, I don't know the inner details of that. Migration Pact, December 10th at Marrakesh. What's your opinion on this? I've not read that or looked at it, sorry. What will happen in Europe? A good amount of countries have already said no. I presume this is about migration. But what about the ones that are going to say yes? It's not the will of the people, but the puppets, politicians. It's not the will of the politicians either, trust me. Like I said, it goes way above all these globalisation. There's nothing to do with politicians whatsoever. It really doesn't. Is there any way to stop this globalisation? Do we really want to stop globalisation? Or, should I correct that, do we really want to stop migration? Where everyone stays in their own fake borders. There's nothing wrong with people migrating. The problem we have is we've got a perceived cultures, most of which were imposed on us. The Muslim way was imposed on them. The white people way culture was imposed on them. It's not really our culture. The Indian culture is all based on a lie. Because it's actually the Vedic culture that they're promoting. And the Aryans and the Rus. You know, we've been under the divide and conquer for too long. And there's nothing essentially wrong with migration. The problem is the system and the plans behind it. That's the real issue. We have to break down that system and their plans, and that's exactly what we're doing. But unfortunately, the ones that are travelling are not your average everyday person. They're littered with criminals pulled out of prisons, who then go on to do all kinds of heinous acts, paid for, I might add. Yes, they pay for that as well. So then the people in the country is denigrating either Muslims or somebody else who the system wants to blame. But we have to get away from this migrant. Migrants are a problem. Like I keep saying, how can you be an immigrant on your own planet? Legal or illegal? What is your opinion on the Khashoggi book? That's their books, not ours. If it's the same one, I'm almost certain it's that Khashoggi plan, what they're going to do and what they think they're going to do anyway. What they think and what happens kind of doesn't work anymore, as we've seen. Do you agree that the corporations, private militias and mafia-style scare tactics are a bigger threat possibly than rogue government officials? Yes. These private groups, be it G4S, Citadel, Blackwater, Z, and all the other names, are the government as it stands. They are the corporation. The politicians are not operating in a government, they're operating in a corporation. What we're trying to do is restore the real government and get rid of these government services. What happens is a country collects all the money and then gives it to these private malicious security people operating as government services, and they run the hospitals and they run the police, etc., etc., and the just us system. Governments are not running the government anymore. They haven't in anyone's lifetime who's listening to this show. And we have to shut them down. But these people are not accountable. They don't come under the government law. Like most of the 3-letter, 4-letter and 5-letter groups in this country. They're not accountable to Congress or anyone. That has to stop. Will we live long enough to receive manna's help? Most of us will. It depends on what age you are. So many are dying because of the elite's anger response towards the changeover. Can they be stopped before the populations are genocided? Well, they have, because we haven't been genocided. Yes, there's still deaths going on, but nowhere near 90%. In fact, nowhere near the real figure, which was 100%, despite what the Rothschilds and so-called elites think. They were going to get genocided as well eventually. Oops. I'll have more on manna later. Can a energy vampire take people's energy by holding their right hand with a left hand? No. You don't need to hold anything to vampire people's energy. But there may be certain ways. A person having a crisis asked me to hold their hand, and I did, and I was wondering if there may have been more to it, if any. Well, any contact is a transfer of energy, be it love, fear, or violence. So, it's who you interact with. If you're in a field of negative, low vibrational people, it's going to drag you down. And I have a piece on that in the op-ed pieces later. I just cut them out of my life because they were more service to themselves, did not seem to want to listen to reason, wanted to blame me for whatever they could, make me codependent. Yes, that's vampiric. There's lots of info about consciously and purposely manifesting your life. What's the truth about manifesting purposefully? This subject comes up all the time, but as with everything, there's lots of misinformation. That's subjected to the self. It's up to you how you manifest your life. mixing with people of low vibration is not going to help that. Having greed, not need, also doesn't help. It's like everyone wanting to manifest winning the lottery. Well, not everyone can win it. In fact, I would suggest most of the ones who do win it are all part of the elites one way or another, so they keep all the money. They don't want us commoners having money and getting into their circles. But the manifestabilities over the last 4 years has increased. But have people used it? Largely no. It's up to you. I've been talking with people about the projects and they have submitted and just getting a generic response back, because that's all the time allows. Once the funding comes through, they will all be contacted and all proposals will be looked at. In order to keep my Australian politicians honest, yeah, right, I'd like to know how much Kim gave him back in UN fees. Any chance of getting any details on this? No, that's private between the countries and the trust. I see Kim and Anna von Reitz were attempting to work together behind the scenes. I also see Anna is back at her old game, calling Kim this and that, and again it leads me to believe that Anna tried to get something and didn't from Kim, and now they are not assisting one another. Can you enlighten us on this? I've covered all this several times in several shows. Anna asked for 1/3 of America's in-ground resources in alliance with their Bohemian Grove partner, Michael Young. Kim refused it, obviously. That was going to the Vatican and also to the Chinese elders. As per usual, Anna won't answer those questions. She only likes to throw barbs out and hopes some of it sticks. Well, none of it did. What, if anything, do you know about the Rothschilds getting out of the trust business? Well, they're not involved in the main trust anymore. They were a heavy part of the trustees, with their family having more reptilian DNA than any other family on this planet. Now they don't have any say in it, much to their chagrin, and that's why they're failing. Lots of soul, and they're going to be too long to answer. Soul and spirit level questions, and I may get and fit a few more of them in later. Is it an idea to install People's Club trainers all over the world, with each country a native group of the people who educate? We already have. It's called THI. That's the idea of it. We are the People's Club. So, members or listeners. There's far more listeners than there is members. And each country want to get a group together in each country. Good. You can come up with projects or come up with ideas, and maybe next year we'll have more time to meet up with everyone. But the People's Club trainers are already there. It's THI. The entity referred to as Anne, can she be found? It needs to be located. It seems to have capabilities similar to Marduk and far above its former human paradigm. Seems to have its own private army citadel. Anne's in trouble, whoever Anne is. Maybe we won't wait till 2020 for her announcement. The original's announcement of death like Bush Senior. Do the provisions of the peace treaty provide protection for Kim and her team? Not really. We do have protection, both our own and outside of that, but not necessarily because of the peace treaty, no. What about the Rothschildians and the other elites whose DNA is largely Draco and reptilian that warred against humanity, as did Marduk? Surely is this not more than just a human problem? Yes, I agree, and it has been referenced to the council. Whilst it's, as Shane admitted on our show on Monday, it's largely it is humans who are running this planet now and will be for a long time. But my argument is some of them are running the old program, which has failed, and it can't reignite. That program has ended and it has failed, and they're continuing to run a failed program, which is why the world is suffering. And then eventually that won't be a problem. Drake says he destroyed the direct energy weapons used on California. Hope so. If the elites cannot be stopped till now, how and who will put an end to their agendas? I don't pass comment on plans or strategies or who is involved. Is Theresa May going to be allowed to sell out all the British to the EU? Well, it's already sold out since 1972. That hasn't changed. What they're trying to do is back out, but it's a lot of it is faction games and got nothing to do with the countries. Will Angela Merkel get anywhere with EU countries losing sovereignty? Angela Merkel's time is close to an end also, and she has little or no say anymore. Today, President Trump and Melania left the tree lighting ceremony abruptly. Was that a message sent to Trump with the laser, or an assassination attempt that was thwarted? Everyone is excited about his treason tweet. Are things more dangerous than ever? Yes, they are. Oh, yes, they are. Trump's been in several lockdowns recently because of clowns. Why couldn't we organise a worldwide or even just America strike or sit down for a day only? Well, nothing stopping you. You know, part of the problem of the Western world, France apart, is the apathy. It's a big problem. People are always waiting for somebody else to do it. Well, if you do that, then wonder why things go on for so long, or what is perceived as going on for so long. The two don't mix. America should have done something a long time ago. The militias should have organised a long time ago. Maybe it will take the French Canadians to do a yellow vest and go right through their country, for it to then filter down into what will likely, given the past history, filter down in the northeast of America, Boston region. They're the Irish, they're the campaigners, they're the protesters, before it then spreads to the rest of the country. You know, why haven't California campaigned? I don't recall, I may be wrong, but all the events that have gone on in California in the last 4 years, droughts, water rationing, etc., never mind having Pelosi and Feinstein walking around, and yet has anyone campaigned? Fire after fire after fire, directed energy weapons, and still I'm not seeing any protest in California. Well, what message does that send? Well, you got to understand, these people have no compassion, no empathy. It's bred out of them from a very young age, basically from day one. They're not going to care. They just want all the people out of paradise so they can claim in-ground resources to keep their game going, like they did in Alaska. If people are just going to sit there and moan about it and not do something, they'll carry on. Maybe we can learn from our enemies. Yes, we are, as Kim says. Provide a nice distraction for a sleight of hand, get censors as the Wall, rescue Getty, recalibrate or start knocking down the hurtful Gwen Towers. Imagine what one day of inactivity might cause. Well, I don't advocate violence, and I don't advocate destruction, apart from one item. The people of Arkansas. What's wrong with you people? They've put the image of the devil in your backyard, and it's still there. It's like the people of Georgia with the Georgia Guidestones telling them you're all going to die, right in your face, and you ignore it. By ignoring it means we're consenting to it. How can I connect with Kingdom of Mana team members? I'm in Southwest Australia and desire to share the THI Kingdom of Mana info with the heads of many groups, communities and claimed authorities in our region. THI and Kingdom of Mana are no longer together and haven't been since October of last year. It was announced in a show in February, March. We tried to keep it private without public animosity, but unfortunately the Kingdom of Mana group decided otherwise. But THI no longer will mix with the Kingdom of Mana group, as they are working for the Rothschilds. Sorry. I saw a video lately in which people who allegedly were colourblind, after they received special glasses, they started seeing colours. Some of them miraculously knew what the name of each colour was. Are there actually people who are really colourblind, or is it just theatre? I'm colourblind. A lot of people are colourblind. Some people have issues with certain colours, and the most common one is green and brown. Depending on the lighting, it can look both colours to someone who's partially colourblind. There's others who have issues with yellow and blue, or red and green, or red and brown. So it is more common than perhaps you think. Could you please explain the difference with SSP experiences in a recent show you did in regards to the demons and magic? I am an SSP experiencer and I have certain recalls of being with celebrities and so forth. What's the difference with this SSP abductions? None really. I don't think I suggested it was different. There is the ET abductions, and there's also the MyLab abductions, which is more to do with the SSP. Maybe that's what you're trying to reference. Mixing with celebrities and so forth suggests you were in the monarch program, and that takes a lot to back out of. There's a number in the alternative community, both as listeners and also as guests, who have been in that monarch program. And yes, I've heard all the stories of becoming sex slaves for certain celebrities, etc. A bit like Britney Spears. She was a monarch girl and tried to back out of it, and you saw what happened to her. Well, you don't think it was her that shaved her head, do you? No, it was them. It's a more common problem than people realise, and I know that only too well this year. Have the pacers been affected financially now? Yes, they have. And how much control do they still have? Like the rest of them, not much. It's more of an illusion of control. Will clones and or AIs be removed and sold elsewhere? Well, a lot of the clones are breaking down, and because there's not as many factories anymore, the desire to replace them is not as prevalent as it used to be. Of course, with the infighting between the factions, replacing them is not something the higher order wants to do. They want to eliminate them all. We did a show, was it 18 months ago? May have been 2 years ago now, where I read out the letter that the Illuminati were down for being extinguished. They thought they were all so important, except they're not. Just slaves, like all the military generals. And Kissinger told you all you were slaves. You didn't listen. Were organic souls installed, merged, infused, escorted in, aka walk-in, whatever those words are, into clones and or AIs to innovate them to look and act like humans? Do they have souls? Well, there is possession of the organic souls. It could well be that there's far more organic souls than perhaps has been put out. This plays into the synth issue. But there's a lot of entities in here that are soulless for whatever reason. A lot of it dark magic and bad practices. They swap themselves out for other entities to play, and those beings are not nice. The clones is something separate altogether from walk-ins. The walk-in was a living entity once. It's just reanimated itself in your vessel. The clones are synths in essence. They may look human, but they're operated by a chip and a computer. Where are we? I haven't got to too far into it. I'll wait for time. A couple of more. I may have to ask people next week to not put any questions, because it's going to take me another week to go through them all again. I've answered that one. How much power does still exist within the elites and the UN in the EU? The UN is defunct and is operating under false pretenses, and the sooner countries realise that and stop participating in it, then we can get a substitute UN that operates for and by the people and not for and by the Rothschilds et al. But the current defunct UN is basically a bully body operated by the Rothschilds and the fake Chinese elders. Their power is much reduced. They only have the illusion of it. And fear. During a recent visit with my twin brother, he became increasingly hostile and belligerent towards me, which is awful because we've always been very close and loving. He has shown dementia-like behaviour, and people say that his meanness is part of the disease. But I swear I saw a demon in his eyes when he was tormenting me. Well, this could well be what I've been talking about, the possession, the takeover of the vessel. I can't, I can only go on what you said, and that's what you saw, and that's what you believe, aligned to what I've said in the shows, particularly the demons and magic one. It's not as far-fetched as society tells you. Now, how you go about correcting that is rather difficult. Largely it depends on whether the person is aware of it and can reconnect. Normally it doesn't end too well, and this is why I warn of magic and all the witchcraft and all that nonsense, because far too many, or far too few, really have the knowledge that is required, that goes with it. They think they know. It's like the shamans in America. They think they know what they're talking about. The reality is they don't. You have to learn from the real shamans, which is largely only represented in one country or two, in Australia and New Zealand, and it's about training over decades, not a 12-month course like those in Peru and Central America and the so-called native people in America. You don't learn that type of knowledge in 12 months. You just don't. And they're putting people at risk with these ceremonies and ayahuasca and peyote and all that stuff. We did a show with a lady who had been on her own journey to Peru, and I think it was the second an evening with Thomas Willow Nyatsuma. She told you all about the dangers of that stuff, and this is what happens. Drugs and alcohol are another way for entities to enter. Seances and Ouija boards and all the other stuff. It's not good. I do understand why we can't let the United States collapse, as the world may collapse, and although we may be able to support our people, other countries may not be able to do the same. Why let the deep state control the timing of their own downfall, though? the delaying of Hoover's testimony. Well, it's easier from an outsider's point of view. It's not as easy when you're in the front line of it. And this is part of the problem. You never walk in that person's shoes. Well, the environment around politicians and state officials and agencies is badly toxic at the moment. Nobody really knows if anyone's got their back. You've got factions involved, you've got private security people involved, you name it. And Rothschilds putting their oar in it, etc. And that's without Clinton and Obama and the Bushes and the Cheneys and the Rumsfelds. I could go on for another hour. All telling this person, you can't do this, and if you don't do this, we're going to torture your children, which is what actually happened to Obama on his inauguration. These people have been in control a long time, and they use threats and all kinds of intimidation. And the investigations are far more reaching than most people realise. It's not about just investigating one item. It's dozens, because of it's like a giant umbrella, and they all come under it, and it's got spokes going off here, there and everywhere. But it's all connected, and it takes time. And there isn't the manpower to deal with the vast amount of investigations going on. And then you've got the drama and fun and games of bipartisanship and all that nonsense. Then you've got the deep state chiming in, the Pentagon chiming in, Langley 2 and 3 chiming in. And that's without the NSA and the Department of Homeland Security and the private groups, like I said. It's toxic, and it takes time. It would be quicker if we issued an executive order and banned all mainstream media news channels. Then things would move a lot quicker, in my opinion. Germany, one of the front initiators of the immigration devil pact, another no. They just blame countries. It's nothing to do with Germany. Please stop blaming countries and blaming politicians. It's all the system. And yes, they are, as you said, be one of the few that will sign the document in December. My understanding, having learned in your show from Kim, that the UN is not entitled to do any kind of pact or anything else of that nature because it's not sovereign, and that is correct. It's not really the UN that's operating anymore, it's the Rothschilds with Chinese elders and all the other nonsense. It doesn't exist. But they keep it going, and the media tells the people that this is the UN and nothing's changed, when in reality it already has. They're bankrupt. That's why they're trying to get countries to sign up to them, so at the point of signing up, that country has to hand over 2% of its in-ground resources. Stupid Ireland signed up for it. It's just another harvesting program, and it needs countries to stand up to the UN and the IMF and tell them to go and F themselves. neither are valid, and both of them are bankrupt. But know that pact is not valid or binding in any way in the real world. In their world of illusion it is, which is what they're still hanging on to. Trump's campaign promise to drain the swamp is neglecting one important element. The evil Khazarian Zionists who have infiltrated our government for almost a century. Present examples are Mnuchin and Ross, to name only a few. And Trump in the last 2 weeks has mentioned that Israel needs our help, and this infuriates me no end. Do we have any future hope of disposing of this malignant cancer state in the near future for the benefit of America and the world? Well, they're going down, same as everybody else. And they will throw Israel under the bus when Israel's ceased to serve their purpose, like Mr. Netanyahu. That's why he's up on corruption and bribery charges, is it not? They'll throw anyone under the bus to keep the system operating, but it's failing. MSM headline story: Stephen Mnuchin is under consideration to become Trump's next chief of staff, but he has indicated he feels better suited at the Treasury. Why is this potential upgrade in his position? Is this administration posturing, or instead demonstrating where the allegiance really lies? Your first 3 words said it all. A mainstream media headline story. We're not pleased that he hasn't been publicly fired yet. Privately he has. But this is part of the standoff and the threats that are ongoing. If you get rid of him, then this will happen. It's like Trump's kind of backed into a corner with Saudi Arabia. There's a massive trade deal with Saudi Arabia. If he suddenly denounces Saudi Arabia, then his jobs and finances are going to be severely hampered. But he's also got people in the administration who are telling him, you're going this way, or we're going to do this. We're going to EMP this state, or we're going to direct energy weapon this state. This is what's going on currently. Is there a real possibility that POTUS could be impeached? And if so, how do you see this being played out? There's always a possibility, but they won't have sufficient votes to carry it forward. Can you please provide any updated timeline, weeks versus months, for fake wealth destruction events, and how transition is going to Manor World Holding Trust curated transactional banking in America and elsewhere? That's a plans and strategy question that I will not answer. Drake said that prices will revert to the 60s. Gas will be around 40 cents and bread at 50 cents, even if the dollar is devalued 30%. And the American standard of living will double. Can you speak about this positive change coming into our pocketbooks? If you want to believe Drake, you carry on. Sorry. Me. Mass arrests 2 weeks, and still we wait. But no, gas will not be going 40 cents and bread 50 cents. It's utter rubbish. One more question. There's still a fair degree more of that requires more time to answer than I have. Truth or fear porn? With what is coming, should we have at least 6 months of food, water and ammo on hand? Not really, no. If you can afford to do that, fine. Is that a must-have item for that length of time? In my opinion, no. You know, you should always, I've been warning the whole year, always have cash on hand, preferably a month's, 1 month. Food, again, it's up to you. I don't think we'll get, it's always possible, particularly with the shutdown being imminent if the standoff continues. But 2 weeks, yeah, I said it, Dave, 2 weeks to a month of food and cash should see everyone through. I think we have enough to correct things within a few days or less than a week, should anything of a more catastrophic nature take place. Final one. I have a question about something you said not long ago about there being, quote, 9 million saviour warriors, unquote, on standby for Earth. I didn't say that. Right, let's have a music break. Do we have a story on... This will lead us in on why I'm going to play this song. New primary school data released by the BBC this week. Analysts suggest it will take 50 years to close the achievement gap between England's rich and poor pupils. If the pace of change remains the same as it has done since 2011, poor pupils will not catch up until 2070, the report shows. 51% of the poorest pupils reached the expected levels, that's their levels, not our levels, in the national end of primary school tests, and this compares with 70% or more of their better off peers, leaving a gap of 19 percentage points. Again, this stuff has to end. There's no way any teaching program should take 50 years to change. That's also rubbish. But when you are educating, and education means training of animals, then it's not a surprise, is it? You are sending your children to the zoo. Hi all, and welcome back to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. I managed to get through a load of questions. Some of the more detailed ones are held over, so please don't put them back in. They all stay on the page, and I pick them up when I can. Right. Intel. This is a quote from Mr. Trump, and it's indicative of things that are going on now, and we will have more in later shows, not too far away. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through the military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government. And I am proud to shut down the government for border security. I will take the mantle and I will be the one to shut it down. This is what is going to play out over the next 8 days. Trump deliberately brought in Schumer, Chucky, and the entity known as Pelosi, in with the media to tear them a new asshole, essentially. And he did. The wall is a sad issue. He knows the wall is funded, and he knows where it's coming from. It's all a strategy game. Just a pity Mike Pence sat there like a showroom dummy and said, Jack, maybe he'll have a long vacation. Next item. Clowns from the Pentagon and also Langley, at the behest of Chinese elders and the Rothschilds, spent all day on Monday hammering the Treasury inside the office, and they were trying to force them into accepting new currencies, which we have warned about. Treasury reserve notes, which is a debt instrument, and or United States notes, which is another debt instrument, all backed by an SKR, which I'll explain shortly what an SKR is, which was fake and had no backing. Now, the trust had forewarned them in an extensive brief the day before, following Rothschild's secret meeting. It wasn't that secret, as we found out. Oops. And they were planning, Rothschilds had this secret meeting over the weekend, and that was what they were planning. Now, Monday failed, and they tried again all day Tuesday and got rebuffed again. Now, essentially, this was confirmed as a fake currency by both the trust and also the Treasury. Mr. Trump is also aware of those shenanigans and who was involved in it. Again, this is another incident that's now come up that has to be dealt with on top of all the 50, 60 or 100 other issues that are currently ongoing. Now, essentially what they were trying to do was fund the budget and also fund all those government departments or non-government departments and the banks who are all currently running at negative equity and have been for the past month. Now, the trust gave $250 million to the Treasury to pay people's wages only. It's for nothing else. Otherwise, all the staff wouldn't have got paid. So to those who keep doubting that the clowns are still in control and they run everything and they've got all loads of funds to keep going, this incident alone tells you they don't. When you add in the IMF telling 134 countries to ditch their currencies, remember the RV was about revaluing the currencies, and to go crypto, it tells you a very different picture of what is really going on. And like I said, we can play the long game. They can't. They have nothing left. The government is operating on a week-by-week basis now. there won't be a full budget implemented unless certain changes are agreed to. It's going to be a very interesting week. Message to the clowns. When are you going to ignite some of your brain cells into critical thinking mode? You have waited and waited for the fabled RV based on asset-backed currencies since the last century. Not this one. And they keep telling you tomorrow and tomorrow. Yet if they had the asset backs they say they have, why are they producing fake currencies like super notes, which is double allocation numbered notes? I will have a description on them shortly, and fake SKRs. Are you that retarded? Or just a treasonous, selfish set of bastards, to put it bluntly? Waiting for your billions of dollars of dinars payout, which will never ever arrive. Whilst the people in this country and globally suffer. A reminder that this planet is now designated for humans. You're not there to carry out plans for Rothschildians and their old failed Draco system. It's sink or swim time. You can swim with us or drown with the old system. Either way, we don't care. But you might. Because it's your groups. They are drowning. TikTok. SKRs or SDRs are special drawing rights and refer to an international type of monetary reserve currency, so you know where it comes from, and was created by the IMF, go figure, back in 1969, that operates as a supplement to the existing money reserves of member countries. Now, according to them, it was created in response to concerns about the limitations of gold and dollars as the sole means of settling international accounts. And the SDRs augment international liquidity by supplementing the standard reserve currencies. So they say. And an SDR is essentially an artificial currency instrument. They love them, don't they? Used by the IMF and is built from a basket of important national currencies. The IMF uses SDRs for internal accounting purposes, and SDRs are allocated by the IMF to its member countries and are backed by the full faith and credit of the member countries' governments. The makeup of an SDR is re-evaluated every 5 years. So that's their description. The real description is essentially countries like South Korea gave all their assets to Hong Kong and they draw off the value. It's a bit like how the Bank of England and originally America collected their wealth. It is based on the assets of other countries, which they leverage. And the issues arise when the country asks for it back, as it's already been leveraged by tens, if not hundreds of times, and those countries holding it have nothing left. Remember Germany asking for its gold back, and the US said it would take 7 years to return that gold, which is exactly the same amount that is mined out of the ground over 7 years. In other words, they had none. It was all gone. So that's what the Rothschilds and the Mnuchin's goons in the Treasury, allied with the Federal Reserve people and clowns at the Pentagon and Langley, were trying to force the Treasury into on Monday and Tuesday this week. It failed. Supernotes. These are copies of the original bank notes. All notes have an allocation number on, and all of them are registered. Every single note is registered within the trust. All of them. So should they show up, the system recognises them and then can delete those notes. And this is why they are going round doing cash deals like the Monsanto Bayer transaction, Bayer being Rothschild, and also the Obama and Hillary cash deal to Iran. All supernotes. Currently they have just printed out many trillions of them to try and force them onto countries. Now, because of the teaching of Kim and the team, countries will no longer allow allocations of new numbers on any notes. They're all aware of it now. And so what the clowns did, they took to printing copies of those notes, duplicate allocation numbers, all done largely by the De La Rue printing companies, which are all owned by the Rothschilds. Message to all nations. Please remove De La Rue from all of your countries. They are a hostile takeover group operating within your country that charge 10% on all notes printed and have wrecked or wrecking all of your economies. You and we don't need them. Declare your country sovereign with the trust. You can then create your own national banks and treasury, devoid of external influence, and subsequently print your own currencies at much lower cost and also without external influence. This measure will revitalise every single country on the planet, and I hope more of you step forward to a new future and away from the dark shadows of the failed old systems. The longer you carry on with the old systems, you will go down with it. African countries, you need to remove Citibank from all of your countries, as all transactions in your countries have to go through Citibank. You don't need them. They are vampiric. South and Central American countries needs to remove all Wells Fargo banks, as they, like Citibank, operate in the same way. You can remove them by declaring sovereignty. Create your own national banks. Final part of the intel is all I can say is there is a lot going on now on so many levels, but the key words are fear and desperation on their part, not ours. We are progressing nicely with our teaching project. More are now coming forward, including, I might add, the clowns. At this point, they are only offering bullshit deals, which we now ignore, and wait until they return with better ideals, not deals. There are no more deals for them on the table. They chose to ignore the table existed at first, and then what was offered on the table. Now you have neither. Things are kind of in a standoff pattern in many respects. This week may bring the patterns into clearer view, particularly with the budget. But we hold all the aces. We know that now. The clowns hold the Joker's card outside of the game and are stuck in the box. And that won't change. Right, let's get on to some... let's do this one first. This is some of the things that the Trust has done. And as a point, we have a lot of new members. There's a point to all this also. But there'll be, this was written a couple of weeks ago. There'll be no USNs, no TRNs, no cryptocurrencies. We have vast quantities of funds, digital and physical assets available for every country, all contained within the Manor World Holding Trust. The Trust, who paid the last 3 American budgets, I might add, otherwise this country would have already been bankrupt. The IMF threatening 134 countries this month to ditch their currencies and switch to crypto. That will be blocked. The IMF are bankrupt anyway, and why is because they owe the Trust 180 trillion alone. That's just the IMF. The Trust hand-delivered declaring American sovereignty to Mr. Trump on January the 27th, 2018, and yet we wait for it to be implemented. The Trust blocked the Fed from trading or using US dollars on American soil. The Trust also revoked the Fed's license as it had expired. The Trust also paid off the American debt to the Fed of 196 trillion last week, as the Trust owns the Fed, as it was pledged to the Trust years ago. No money changed hands, as essentially the Trust wiped the debt. So the 21 trillion debt is officially not owed anymore. The Trust is working to get back all American military hardware sold to a Chinese group, not the government, and military are currently leasing it back from them. This was to keep the military funded, as the Treasury was being looted by the Rothschilds and have had no funds for years. Military is waiting for the RV payout from the Rothschilds' Chinese elders, which they are incapable of paying. It would require a down payment, not the full, a down payment, 10%, of $4.25 quadrillion. That's 15 zeros. Just to start the RV. They don't have the assets to support floating 4.25 quadrillion. It's actually impossible. Trust gave money to Trump for the wall last year. The Rothschilds raided the Treasury and stole all that money. The Trust, who controls the quantum system, which has control of every bank, was able to locate the stolen funds and draw it back into the Trust. The Trust did the same this year, when the IRS sent $780 billion to a Swiss Rothschild's bank account for all of our collected taxes. Trust located it and put it all back into the Trust for later disbursement to the countries and the people. The Trust closed down the official UN last year. collected all the rogue funds the UN collected fraudulently from participating countries, gave all the funds back to the stolen countries. All the funds stolen back to the countries, sorry. The Trust has spoken to or worked with all top officials in each country over the last 18 to 24 months, and many are ready to work with the Trust and ditch the Rothschilds' Chinese elders who ran the Trust previously but were cut off in 2007, and this is what brought in the global recession. The reason being is the elites only had money they looted from the Trust. The Trust owns every piece of land, all in-ground and above-ground resources and assets, all banks, including central, and all buildings, as everything was put into the Trust as collateral, and subsequently pledged to the Trust as they never paid back the liens. And so subsequently the Trust owns everything. The Trust has told the world we will retain all funds and assets owed to each country, then the rest of the funds will be split 50 for the countries and 50% to the people via projects. The Trust agreed a deal directly with President Trump 2 weeks ago for the Trust to give America $105 billion to run the disaster relief program for Florida, Georgia, Alabama, North and South Carolina, and also California, as FEMA has no money. The $105 billion was a gift out of the Trust. Trump agreed the deal and instructed the Treasury to issue cards with which the Trust would then load up to the tune of $105 billion. When Hillary Clinton and Mr. Mnuchin, backed by security forces known as Citadel, stormed the Treasury building and removed our ambassador and blocked the funding of the disaster relief program. I can say a lot more on this. The above is just the overview, surface view. For further details, contact me at truthhonourandintegrity@gmail.com, and I will expand on things or listen to the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. That was posted on the Greg Hunter page twice. It's now 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he ignored it. Some of those details alone are worth the show, whether they think it's real or it's not. But he ignored it. So Mr. Hunter looks like he's another paid operative that avoids the full truth. Just gives it to people in sound bites of political intrigue, like Catherine Austin Fitz. They don't want to know the truth. The reality is it has no bearing, the political intrigue of what's really going on, and the majority of it is portal people distraction theatre. You would think a so-called journalistic show like Greg Hunter would have been interested in at least some of that. Apparently not. Adrenochrome. They're one of the first shows, may have even been the first show, that mentioned the issues of what it is all about. And there was an article this week I decided to pull some bits out of that will be interesting to listeners. Now, adrenochrome is a chemical that's been known since at least the 1930s, and is a chemical compound with the molecular formula of C9H9NO3, and is produced by the oxidation of adrenaline in mammals. Now, the chemical especially concentrates in the body during times of highs, fight or flight response conditions, which is why I've spoken about don't get too high and don't get too low. Such as during extreme trauma and also suffering. Now the elites use it by kidnapping children, rape and torture them in order to concentrate the adrenaline in their glands, and then harvest the adrenochrome from the glands while the subject is still living, as adrenochrome does not last long in a corpse, and then murder the victim after the drug is extracted. Some of you may have seen some of it in the Hillary Clinton Hoomer Abeddon video. Alternately, the subject may be kept alive for repeated extractions, and what happens is a needle is plunged into the eye to extract the adrenochrome from the brainstem without cutting into the skull. They also run massive child trafficking rings all over the world which buy and sell children, and as I said, the adrenochrome is more readily concentrates in a child's glands, since the glands do not grow much with age, and since children experience massively heightened fight or flight reactions and increased adrenaline surges as a result of trauma, is why it's mainly done on children. So now you know why 900,000 children go missing in America alone each year. Yes, I said that figure correctly. 900,000. And then we come up with the name of Google and their GPU, graphics processing unit. It's named Adreno. Then Google released Chrome in September of 2008. Obtained their GPU in 2009 and immediately renamed it to Adreno, as in Adrenochrome. Google obviously knew about this stuff and have put it in our faces. And if you're talking about protests, there's a good example, something to protest or boycott. Let's remove all Google search engines off our phones and computers. Most of their revenue is advertising. Well, if you're not going on the Google pages, no one's buying it. I mean, some people might say that's a coincidence, but why would you name your processing unit Adreno and then Chrome? It's not a coincidence. It's basically telling you that these people torture, rape and murder children right in your face. Google, or is it really go ogle, as in let's spy on you? And in my opinion, these sick bastards need to be closed down in the future, along with Gates and Microsoft. Another eugenics program. And I'm hoping many come forward with their plans for a new internet and platforms, minus those two satanic empires. Come forward with a valid platform that doesn't involve either of them, and we will fund them from the trust when the blocks are removed. The alt media should bandy together and start an anti-Google protest based on that. Really should. We had Shane on Monday, which brought up a lot of confirms for this show in some aspects of where we are going and how we can be the change. Let's not wait for them, either the system or the sleepers, but push forward with how we wish the world to be, regardless of what they or others think. And because of our nature and desire to help, we will always be ready and available to pick them up and guide them on their path when they're ready. Now, the gist of what Shane was saying in his own way, in many aspects mirrored many of our shows. We are the change, and also the two worlds theory that was proposed on this show back in 2015. Originally it was on Cosmic Voice, but is now becoming reality with our own two eyes. And Shane mentioned about the Breakaway group. We're essentially a group of leaders who tread the pathway for others, like the pioneers who trekked across America 300 to 500 years ago. Only this time we'll trek globally. And in many ways that show was cathartic for Shane, from my perspective, which over time he will see more. I know more than most his journey through life and his epic struggles and sadistic ways of being involved in that circle. It's a circle of death, not life. But it also shows how one can triumph over tragedy. They tried the sink and sink method with him, but he always swam. But in my opinion, he's been swimming for far too long. And if the others choose the sink method on him again, they will face the same consequences they had in the recent past. You can trust me on that. And a message to those clowns and entities: play straight and leave him be, or die. It's that simple. Should Shane choose the right path and is not interfered with, he will play a major role here over time. A role that will be revealed over time. An important role in our history of coming together as one. Any interference in that will have its consequences for those who choose to meddle. You people and beings have had your time and lost. It's now our time. So you can either get on the source energy train or be left at the station for thousands of years. Your choice. Song for Shane. Hi all, and welcome back to the final part of tonight's show. Some really sick people on this planet, but they are being addressed, and that's the key. And I pulled up a word to find out where it came from and where the meaning and what it all means this week. Integrity. It's what these clowns lack. Sadly, is what a lot of people lack. And it's from the word integer, and it means the whole of anything, a whole number, not a fraction, or a faction for that matter. And it's you think of it as a whole character, as one. It speaks of the unimpaired state of one's mind and heart, of moral soundness and purity, of incorruptness, of uprightness, and of honesty. Just as we would talk about a whole number, so we can also talk about a whole person who is undivided. And a person of integrity is living rightly, not divided, nor being a different person in different circumstances. A person of integrity is the same person in private that he or she is in public. No difference. And has the same root word as does the word integrated. A bit like how you integrate your shadow. You become the whole person. And a leader of integrity has taken the principles that govern his or her life, internalized them, we keep talking about that as well, and integrated them into every area of their life. So integrity is not like a weather vane that changes direction with every shift of the social winds. If everyone applied that, we would have a much better planet. I mentioned recently the feminism piece, and how love had been distorted, and lo and behold, there's an article on it this week. Funny how that works. And a survey was done by a number of banking groups, and it's stated as follows: 56% of Americans say they want a partner who provides financial security more than head over heels love. That backs what I was saying. They don't understand love if they think money is more important. It's the reality. Now, this sentiment is not just held by women either. 54% of men and 57% of women. Now, with regards to generations, Generation Z which means you were born between 1996 and 2010, is the only generation to choose love over money. 54% to 46%. And they say the youth don't know. That's because around that time they came with extra DNA. And iPhone owners are 21 times more likely to judge others negatively for having a less expensive Android, while those who have an Android are only 15 times more likely to judge others negatively for having an iPhone. It's the comparative mindset again, isn't it? And those who have older models of either smartphone are 56% less likely to get a date. How shallow is that? If you've got an older phone or a smartphone, you're 56% less likely to get a date based on a phone. Now, according to a recent survey of more than 5,500 single people aged 18 and over by the dating site Match.com, couples who spend $20,000 on their wedding are 46% more likely than average to get divorced. And that risk falls to 29% higher than average for those who spend $10,000 to $20,000. The more you spend, the more fake it is. Seems to be the way. The less you spend, the more real you are about what real love is. %56% are less likely to get a date because you've got an older phone or a smartphone. And you wonder why this country's going to hell in a handbasket. You can blame the cabal all you like. That's the people's actions. We don't have to be doing that. We really don't. And as for 56% saying they want a partner who provides financial security, get a life and learn real love. Next item. Group emotions and thinking are really now starting to flow. Many are on the brink of tears, and many are expelling them. And yes, I do observe. And the reason being is people are now picking up on a new energetic flow that is circulating globally. This is also why so many people are protesting against the system. And this is down to the change in frequencies and also the source energy flow that's spiraling out now in all directions. And unlike some of those people in the survey, that message is love, compassion and understanding, and away from finger pointing blame games, as the reality is you all played the game. You all participated in creating this monstrous world that harvests adrenaline out of children. Not directly, but certainly indirectly. Bedeviled by greed, evil, ill intent, competitive and comparative mindsets. Essentially, we have forgotten the basics in life, how to enjoy it, how to revel in its simplicity. Nature is simple, so why have we complicated life so much? An energy clearing is underway for those ready to receive it. Sadly, many aren't. They are mired in their vampiric ways of harvesting off others due to their repeated failure to stand in their own responsibility, sovereignty, powers and energy. Failure to do their shadow and inner work. It's all too easy to lean and harvest others' energy and life force by doing nothing for themselves, never mind anyone else. It's all about input. Shadow and inner work can only be done by you. Some can help you with it, but no one can fix what's inside of you but you. And in essence, this separates the wheat from the chaff. All of us are wheat, but only a few recognise it. From those who talk it, but won't walk it. Those of personal responsibility, and those who want the saviour programme. Those who wish to lead, and those stuck in follower mode. Yes, I've seen the comments on the chat on both pages, and some people are struggling with the emotions. Ride the wave. It's something fairly joyous in many ways, and also shows you're on the right path. It all comes down to you and what you allow or accept. Low or high vibration. You will not reach the mental planes and higher consciousness in the lower vibrational state. It's just not possible. Lower vibration traits are anger, hate, fear, sadness, worry, confusion, chaos, apathy, pain, suffering, blame, shame, guilt. And the two key ones to overcome, closed minds, and the far more damaging one, closed hearts. Anger and hate are projections. Fear leads to sadness and worry for the future. But fear is a future word, as it hasn't happened yet. But it can happen, as you've not addressed your own ability to change that future. Like the question earlier about manifest. Your future doesn't have to be that way. It is the future. You have an opportunity to change that future. Confusion, chaos and apathy are something that they created, but you bought into. Blame, shame and guilt are your own failure to address your shadow and inner work. Closed minds are the cancer of society. Closed hearts are the blockages at the solar plexus, and why so many go with gut instincts and not heart instincts. Higher vibrations are joy, happiness and kindness, compassion, clarity, wonder, reverence, calm, curiosity, with two key vibrations of open mind an open heart. Joy and happiness are of your own making. Never let anyone else decide your mood for you. Kindness and compassion, remember, costs nothing materialistic, only your loving energy. Clarity comes with understanding. Wonder is your manifest abilities. Reverence is respect, like saying treat others how you would like to be treated in return. Calm, the calm, the 45-55 anyone? I've said it often enough now. Calm brings balance, which is centering. Curiosity is what brought you here, and has added benefits, for me anyway. As the saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. I couldn't miss that one. I just couldn't miss that one. But curiosity can lead to the opening of the mind, and the final stage of really opening your heart, which has all the 5 senses and some extra when switched on fully. It's your choice. Low vibration, astral, higher vibration, on the way to mental planes. Final item for tonight is people always ask, why is everything taking so much time? My first answer is you don't fully understand or comprehend the depths of change undertaken and or required here. THI has been going for just over 2.5 years now, and those who have been with us from the start are just now really grasping what has and is unfolding. THI is different from all other shows on the internet as it covers a gamut of topics in a variety of formats, although I must mention Randy Morgan's show as well as a point of learning. And we've all undergone a relearning exercise in many ways, as what is being attempted is a 120-degree shift to what you thought you knew or assumed you knew, all of which was sent from the world of illusion into a new real version called reality. And it won't be a virtual reality one either. The virtual reality world Shane described is for those who are not ready for organic reality. They love the city of light pill and the world of illusion too much. It's an addiction, and it will become the 6th hook in essence. But remember, that is their free will choice. They chose that path. It's not your fault in any way, shape or form. They took the path of illusion. So I want no one who listens to this show to feel any shame, guilt or remorse because they couldn't get them to shift. We have tried our best and we have rescued many, and they are your focus for now. And yourself. It requires strong people. It entails much rejection. It asks people to work on themselves, trust themselves before trusting others. It requires critical, logical and common sense thinking, which sadly is very rare on this planet. And yet, are these not, or should these not, be the basics of life and discussion? It shows how far we fell. Critical, logical and common sense are the basics. And yet now it looks almost like genius levels of thinking. It shouldn't be that way. So for 2.5 years, THI members have basically had a body, soft and hardware rewrite. A removal of the malware and the spyware out of your system, a deletion of the old programs that they and you installed, all phased out, and a new set of ideals to operate from, all launched from the safe platform base where you can be the real you, not the mask, called THI. But it's taken, for most of you, 2.5 years. And some are still working their way through it, like the Pac-Man maze. Some will still go down blind alleys and blocked passages. For a long time on this planet, that's all there was. Blocked passages and blind alleyways. I said in the last show of 2017 this quote, which some may have understood then and some not. But more will now understand this quote near 12 months later. And it was as follows. 2018 will be the year of the unveiling. Doors will be opened on all levels for you to walk through. Unquote. And walk through many of you have done. But the system rewrite you all chose to undertake, I can't force anyone to do anything. I can only guide in my own way. And this is why I've never really advertised or over-promoted THI, as it's not for everyone. Most are just not ready for it. But rejoice in the many who are, and have refound a soul connection between us all. What is happening is twofold, like a wave. Some on a downward wave and some are on the up wave. Many of you started out before THI on the up wave. You realised something is not right with this world, and so you had a head start. And yet despite that head start, you still underwent a new learning curve that has taken some time to adjust to, and then launch yourself on your path of discovery about you and all around you. But what about the people who are on the down wave? Do they not have to take some time to navigate down the wave first before plateauing and then joining the up wave? If it has taken you 2.5 years, how long do you expect them to get to your level? Some of you may be saying or thinking now. THI is like a dimmer switch. We increased the light as people processed and grasped each stage of it. A gradual turning up of the switch. But the others, and in particular those in the world's top positions, had their light on full. Except it wasn't light at all, but dark. Mirror magic illusion, and why they called themselves the illuminated ones. But I'm sorry for them, but it was the false light you absorbed. An illusion of the real light and its message. For those people, They have to dim the light in phases until it goes dark, and then start the real light journey back up again. How long do you think those people will take to reach your level and understanding? You're thinking now, holy shit, that may take forever. For some of them, yes, but not all. And this is why we need to push forward in and on our path. We can't wait for them. We have to be the change and drag them along for the ride. Immigration or migration going forward will not be country to country, but from their world into ours. Remember the saying posted again this week in the group. The ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do change the world. Join and embrace the crazy train. All aboard. Ha ha ha. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams.